Good problem solving. I like it.
Stop, Shannon.
Okay, it is now 8:49 and on Tuesday, August 23rd, and I will call this Finance and Economic Development Committee to order. We apologize for the lateness, had some technical difficulties, but we are now underway. Our first item is to elect a chair for this meeting.
I would nominate Malcolm.
Okay,
to chair the meeting.
and I will second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Passes. Okay, so our first agenda item today will be our 2022 budget amendment, and for that we will hear from Troy Wood.
Great, thank you, Deputy
We
Mayor.
probably need to approve the
Oh.
agenda.
Sorry about that. You're right.
I would move to approve the agenda as published.
I will second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and let us move on to our budget amendment.
Okay, great, thank you. This is actually the second budget amendment of the year. Normally we only have one, but we had some fairly significant amendments identified early in the year, so we actually amended the budget already and back in April. But this is kind of the normal process to come to this committee in August and adopt what we call the final budget amendment in September. You do have the fine details of all the budget amendments in Exhibit A, but I'd like to cover just a few of the more significant amendments for you this morning. In terms of the general fund, we are adding 3 positions. This committee's heard and been briefed on all 3 positions already. But just as a reminder, there's a human resource analyst, there is a civil engineer in the transportation division, and then there's a journey level tech in our facilities department. So those are 3 positions. The amendment also includes $300,000 for capital purchases for our partnership for the makerspace. Back in April, the city council authorized actually a full $500,000 towards that partnership. $300,000 going to capital that will be purchased this year, and then $200,000 in 2023 for operations. So you'll see that in the budget for 2023. There's $50,000 in the budget amendment for Lacey Midtown branding. This probably will sound familiar to you. This was originally in the 2018 budget. We carried that over for a couple of years and it kind of got lost in the shuffle, but we're bringing that back. We would like to move forward with that project. And the final general fund amendment that I'd like to talk about is the $50,000 that will go towards the feasibility study for the partnership with North Thurston Public Schools and the YMCA that the council just recently authorized earlier this month. The Transportation Benefit District, this isn't necessarily a new money. We're proposing that we shift the money from the overlay project for 2022 to sidewalks. So a pretty significant portion of the overlay program has been delayed because of utility capital projects that are delayed because of material supply chain issues. So like I said, we want to expand the sidewalk program for this year in lieu of that. A bit of good news in the general obligation bond fund. So this is a fund that we use for debt. There is a balance of about $315,000. We would like to propose to move that balance into the building improvement fund to help fund some of the police station expenses. So of course, this year we have land acquisition and we also have the schematic design, concept design phase of that. So we're proposing that we take those monies and move them into the fund to help out with the police station project. The basic rules for these funds are any general government purpose. So we have a lot of free reign in terms of how we use those funds. So we're suggesting we do that for this year. Building improvement fund, we do have a $186,000 amendment. We have a little bit of expansion of scope on our building access control. So, you know, when you badge into the various city buildings, we're expanding the scope of that to include the new police station and some of the city shop. We do have about $50,000 requested for the museum site. We had 4 change orders actually with the demolition, the well decommission project. Three of those, well, two of them had to do with landscaping. There was another change order. We found asphalt and concrete under the dirt that had to be removed. That wasn't original scope. We had about $11,000 for improvements to the food truck area. So those are your four change orders there. Parks and open space, we're requesting an additional $74,000 for the Great Cuyo Park Phase 1A design. The design needs to include kind of a large picnic shelter, some vegetation management planning, some additional survey work related to the 31st Avenue alignment. So a little more scope there in terms of that design. The RAC capital budget, we're requesting another $84,000 for design for that project. This was originally slated to be an in-house design, but just due to kind of lack of capacity, we're going to actually, get a consultant to design that project. So it's going to be a little bit higher cost.
Can I just jump in there for a second? Absolutely. So the other day I was talking to Scott about, the difference between in-house work and outsourcing work. And in this case, I'm seeing, 16 and it looks like $40,000 difference. So would that be typical of outsourcing work? Would that kind of cost increase?
Well, it depends on the actual work you're asking them to do. So it depends on the project, scope of that project, and how many hours it's going to take. That's really what the two variables are.
Yeah, because a lot of times when you outsource work, you not only are you paying the cost of, well, should I say, I'm not really sure how to phrase this, but we have our work and we have it in such a way that, not only are we paying the hourly rate for the full-time employee, but also the benefits package that goes with it. We combine that together and that's our total cost, right? When we outsource that work, do we do a similar thing, pay them that full cost as opposed to saying, hey, this is what we, the hourly cost of that work, do we?
So we went through a competitive bid process and essentially we got the lowest price of any basically private consultant able to do that work. And so, but in the consultant world, you're going to pay not only just the labor cost, you're also going to pay the embedded fixed cost for that organization. And it's just a typical.
So that's going to be very much the same as what would happen here. So but in this case, we're looking at an extra 40, which is
An extra 84.
Yeah, it's an additional 84,000.
Additional 84.
it requires 84,000, the original 125
No, it's an additional 84 on
additional
top of the
on
125.
top of the 125. So,
So it's not 40, it's 84 additional.
okay, gotcha.
And there's profit built into the private world as well.
Sure.
So
They have to
I mean,
make a
there's,
profit.
it's been a long time since I've looked at a design contract, but what used to be very typical was the actual cost of labor. You had different classifications and an hourly rate. Then you had their overhead rate, which often was 100%, sometimes 200%. And then there's a built-in profit of whatever is negotiated. So there's quite a bit of markup in terms of going outside of the organization.
And here's what we're fighting. So one, we don't have the capacity to do the work. We were hoping to do the RAC parking lot this year. Now it's going to be delayed. But if we try to say hire another engineer to do this work, we're 3 to 4 months out from actually hiring someone and getting them on board. And then whatever delay that is to then actually get the work done. This is probably the fastest way to get it queued up, for the next construction season.
So we'd have to wait until they have the capacity to even schedule a job. And then in addition, pay the additional cost over and above what we would pay here.
Well, you're paying for time too. I think it'd be difficult to meet our time schedule for the RAC parking lot, try to hire someone, get somebody in-house, get them on board, start the work that needs to be done. Hopefully we don't miss the bid cycle in terms of getting the construction out. We potentially could miss the next cycle.
Right. And in my mind, all I'm really thinking about is, what is the additional cost for outsourcing work as opposed to doing it in-house? That's really where I'm steering this towards. And so it's always one of those things, we talk about being short on employees and full-time employee resources by 10% or 30 people. So if we're saving that money, is it possible that we could use some of those dollars to complete projects outside of our full-time employees? And it looks like even if we do go down that road, the additional cost could be an additional barrier. It's not like we're going to get apples for apples in terms of dollars. We're going to pay we're going to absorb.
You're going to pay a premium to get something done quicker.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
And then to wrap up the significant amendments, the equipment rental fund, this is our fleet fund. We have one amendment asking for an additional 20% of the capital budget for this year. What we're experiencing is vehicle orders have been canceled and then we have to reorder, and there is a 20% increase to, in fact, it just happened yesterday. We had orders back in February for 2 Ford F-150 Lightning, so the electric vehicles canceled yesterday. Immediately went to put in the new order for 2023. It was an $8,700 increase on a $43,000 truck.
So they canceled our order? And then we had to go back and reorder, and they had
And pay 20% more. Gotta love that deal.
forced it.
So we want to, maintain maximum flexibility in our budget to be able to deal with those, those shortfalls that happen in today's environment in terms of vehicles.
And I'm not sure, and I don't, not to get more in detail on this, but I think we're obviously treated differently than a retail customer or a dealership. I mean, obviously Ford's first priority is to the retail market. And we're getting a preferred price going through the state contract. So you can just look at it from that perspective. It's not as proper for Ford to, obligate those limited resources to those contracts. So we get caught up in the supply chain issue, and they're basically, doing triage and trying to go to their highest paid customers first, then we're last. So
Sure.
and we
More
we
profitable
lose.
that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to get us off track, but have you noticed any supply chains corrections based on what the Federal Reserve has been doing over the last 4 months?
No, it's pretty much been the same. I mean, it's been a problem for quite a few months, so there hasn't been. The Federal Reserve is trying to slow down the economy, which in theory would lessen the supply chain demand, but we certainly haven't seen. In fact, it seems to be getting worse, if anything, at this point.
You probably know this too. The only thing I've heard anecdotally is that the housing supply hasn't affected price yet, has gone up. So it's gone, it was like less than 2 weeks. Now it's maybe a month and a half.
It's
But
affected price as well on
Yeah.
the housing side.
but you still need at least 5 to 6 months for a balanced market. So we're still short of an equal market when it comes to buyers and sellers.
Yeah, because I mean, it was like, hey, we're gonna do this in an attempt to do this, to slow things down. But then when you turn around and see that, sorry, we can't get you the truck that you wanted. And then we're gonna charge you more for the same truck that you wanted. It appears as though
It's not working.
yeah.
Which is scary because now you got the same issues you had before. It's not curbing inflation as it was expected to do, but now you have higher interest rates on top of it.
Yeah, so it's
It's
a
not a
double
good, it's not a
negative.
good overall picture at all.
You'll see how uncomfortable I am in our next topic. The last amendment, again, related to the Ford F-150 Lightning. We just received word that they're going to close the orders for the F-150 August 31st. So we've actually already ordered the vehicles. We want to catch up with the budget. So there's 7 of those vehicles for next year. So we put in that order, but to keep the integrity of the budget, we want to have that budget amendment in the 2022 budget. We don't have any expectations spending the money, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a contractor purchase without the budget for it. So
So for 2023,
Move
we're
the
talking
money.
about trying to electrify the current city fleet. And so we've identified about 15 vehicle purchases that we're going to transition from internal combustion to electric. And to get ahead of that, based on what we know now about ordering, if we don't do it now, we're going to lose that window if we just go through our normal budget cycle.
So we're gonna go from 2 to 7
That'll be
on
2 to
those
9.
vehicles, 2 to 9.
Yeah, technically, I think
How much more expensive are the electric vehicles on the F-150 than they are if you were doing internal traditional combustion engines?
remember the price to you.
Just curious how
It
much
is
more
more.
we're spending to
Though it's-
electrify these
I think
vehicles.
the electricals were 76 and the internal combustion were, I don't remember what those were.
Well, this has them as 55 each. Which is a really good price for an F-150 right now. You can't buy one retail for 55.
No, you can't, they're in the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay,
What's interesting about I think the electric transition is that you are going to eventually save on maintenance as well as obviously fuel. Because
Why on
we're-
maintenance?
it's-
Still
I
have to
mean,
maintain them.
well,
You
really
have to
the only
change
other, it's
oil.
just, it's just
Tranny
part
fluid.
repair. I mean, you're not really working on the electric motors unless there's some major fault of it.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's what I've heard
I
anecdotally.
mean, I get fuel, obviously. I just didn't realize that maintenance would be less.
Not doing a service every 7,000 miles for oil. You're not doing those type of issues. It's really just tire and brakes. No coolant. It's just kind of interesting.
So these are dated numbers.
Are they illegal? Just kidding.
Sorry, kind of actually. It's pretty accurate, actually. So back in July, when we put together these estimates, the electric 150 was 48,000. Of course, now we know it's 55,000. The equivalent normal F-150 was 39,000, so a 9,000 difference. And it's probably the same now. I would expect all vehicles are going to increase, not just electric vehicles.
Sure.
So
So $9,000 difference by 9 vehicles, okay.
I believe that's the final significant amendment, so turn this back over to the committee, but our recommendation would be to, by motion, send this to the full council for consideration, but be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Well, I would
So
move,
moved. So moved. Please send it to the full council. I
Second.
move that we send this to the full council. All in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay, and that passes unanimously. It looks like our next agenda item is our 2022 mid-year financial report, and Troy has that for us as well.
May get a presentation started.
Or you want me to share your screen first?
Oh, first?
Yep.
Okay. So we have completed the mid-year financial report. This report typically focuses on the general fund. I'll make some brief comments about the utilities, but again, mostly general fund comments. Let's jump right into expenditures for the general fund. Comparing a mid-year general fund to last year's mid-year, we're about 5.7 million higher. Really, in short, I'll get into a few details, but in short, we have a timing issue with some of our capital, one-time capital transfers. You can see there at the bottom. That turns out as a $5 million increase.
Pretty much your whole difference.
So I'd like to kind of highlight some of the more significant variances. Social services actually is a decrease of about 986,000. The main difference is the capital improvements we made over there at the Veteran Services Hub. That's about a $1.2 million difference. So that was one time in 2021. But I will note that the cost and the scope of social services is increasing. In fact, there's about $350,000 more in 2022 so far. We did expend the affordable and supportive housing sales tax. That was the partnership with the county for the Unity Commons project. We have the mobile outreach team embedded in this number. We also have the rapid response cleanup team embedded in that number too. So again, about $350,000 so far in addition. Police, we have an increase of about 452,000. This is primarily IT costs. So we made a jump into the 21st century, issued laptops to all officers, which causes that maintenance and operational costs to go up, as well as replacement build up for those laptops. So it was about a $216,000 increase so far through the first half of the year. Salary and benefits went up about 65,000, but we have to note that there's no COLA or no cost of living adjustment yet for police. So we are still not settled with the majority of police officers. So that number is probably low for what we're going to see as we get towards year end.
Those negotiations are ongoing now.
Ongoing. Engineering, public works engineering and community and economic development both have, increases of in excess of 200,000. For engineering, that is about 100,000 for salaries and benefits. It's also about $60,000 in software maintenance. We have a software package that gets, we signed a new licensing deal every 3 years, and that's just happened to be this year. For community and economic development, $276,000 increase, about 157,000 increase for salaries and benefits. We also have a $78,000 difference because of a one-time capital facilities analysis that we're going through. The council should see that here in September, I believe. Parks, culture and recreation, about $195,000 increase. We're really seeing this activity here for the city starting to return to normal. We're not quite there, but you know, this summer was definitely different than last summer, if you think about it. So I have an increase to part-time salaries and benefits of about 57,000. We have professional services related to recreational services, increase of about 73,000. We have facility rentals up about 36,000. So again, all really based on just increased activity in the recreational world. Transfers out, as I mentioned, this is the main difference between this year and last year. It's really a timing issue when we made those one-time capital transfers. So we made them earlier this year than last year. Looking at the other departments to make up the general fund, current expense, criminal justice, community buildings, the rack, street, and capital equipment. Really just two variances I want to highlight. One is in criminal justice. We have almost a $1.5 million difference. This is entirely related to the new police station. So we took some of the fund balance that was in this fund of $1.6 million and moved that to the capital fund for the land acquisition and design of that project. Capital equipment, an $800,000 increase. Again, that's related to the one-time capital transfers. The most significant transfer we made was $805,000 to the RAC capital fund, and that's for the parking lot that we talked about a little bit earlier. So let's look at the revenue side of the budget. So far through mid-year, we've collected in taxes about $2 million more than last year. Do want to highlight kind of our big three for taxes. Property taxes, we have an increase of about $848,000. This is mostly a timing issue. The first half of the year had we saw a lot of movement in terms of property sales. So what happens at closing is taxes are paid early, they're prorated. You know, the buyer and seller pay their proportionate share. So rather than waiting until May or to make that payment, I think most of us would hold on to our payments until, you know, closer to May. Those get paid at closing. So if a closing happened on January 15th, those taxes would have been paid. So again, I think that's just more of a timing issue. We do expect, you know, by year end to collect about $460,000 more in property tax due to new construction, the 1% levy, the annexation that we had. So we do expect it to be higher by year end, but it's probably going to come down from that $848,000 number. Sales tax through mid-year, a $373,000 increase. Part of this is a cash flow versus accrual accounting issue. You've seen me refer to that in the monthly reports for sales tax. So this number actually includes November and December of last year's sales tax. So we actually collect that January and February the following year. So that's in that number. So if we take that out through mid-year, we're about $80,000 higher. So definitely different than the $373,000. I mean, we had a really good holiday shopping season. But when you do look at that accrual basis, about $80,000 more, or about 1.65%. And you've heard me talk about, you know, potentially when you look at inflation, that's actually in terms of actual activity for sales, it's likely
We're actually
to
spending
decrease.
less or buying less. Because you got 9% inflation and only less than 2% growth.
Exactly.
That's a negative result, not a positive result,
Probably
really.
buying less, but paying more.
Right.
Despite what's happening.
When you were talking about property taxes, were you talking about what portion of I guess the excise tax that's exchanged during the transfer of sale? Or are you talking about the aggregate amount that, you know, between, let's say, for example, a property changes hands in June. And of course, you know, at the closing, the escrow officer is going to say, hey, your responsibility ends here, yours starts here. We're going to go ahead and pay that. And it's that portion that you're talking about.
Right, yeah, that's not anything to do with the real estate excise tax.
Just wondering.
We bring that into a different fund. So yeah, this is just strictly the property tax portion of that closing.
Does the city receive any portion of the excise tax?
We do.
Of the
We
1.70?
get a 0.5%. So we have the full, we have both optional real estate excise tax, so there's 2.25%.
So is that half point built in here or is that?
Is not, we bring that into a capital fund, so there are restrictions on how you spend those funds, so it's basically think capital improvement or infrastructure expenditures, so yeah, that's not embedded in that number at all.
Thanks.
B&O tax, business occupation tax, up about 100,000. Really follows the same trend line as sales tax, but one difference here is an increase to the service portion of that. So for the most part, services are sales tax exempt, but they're not exempt from B&O tax. So there's a slight difference between those two sources. I want to highlight admissions and gambling tax, both showing pretty significant increases, but if you look at 2022, those are basically activities that didn't occur in 2021. So we do need to keep that in mind. Admission tax, I'm showing a $75,000 increase, but compared to 2019, it's still below that level by roughly 40,000. So we're still behind a little bit on that. The gambling tax actually is right at, if you just look at second quarter 2022, it's right at the pre-pandemic level. So
Oh, really?
that's
So
That's come back.
people are back to gambling at the same rate they were before the pandemic.
Anyway, we only have one place to gamble here in the city, right?
Just the one
That's that
casino.
place out
that's
in-
it.
one card room, but there's also pull tab revenues in there, but it's pretty small compared to that.
This is almost all that one facility that you're thinking of. But you know, they sold. It's not the same owners.
I did hear though, Regal was out for chapter 11.
Mhm.
Oh, I heard they were considering it, so that's official.
I saw that.
Supposedly, it's going to be business as usual is what I read, but
Yeah, reorg.
Well, if they,
Get rid of a bunch of debt.
if they shut it down, we'll put Family Fun Center in there. And it's right there. It's a beautiful spot. It's got the sign, you know, and those dollars just don't stop flowing because people will go there. It's not gonna stop, Scott.
that would be subject to emissions tax as well. I just point that out. So that would be a good place to fill it. Utility taxes in total are up about 400,000. Electricity and natural gas kind of leading the way there. And we do want to highlight telephone. It seems like the last 3 years I've come to the committee and talked about decreases. It's quite possible we've hit bottom in terms of people transferring from or getting rid of landline phones and going to mobile phones only. So we'll see. It's been a very recent development in terms of not seeing decreases in telephone utility tax. So
Are we able to like know how many of those are residential versus business? Or is that, I mean, I know that's splicing hairs and I'm not asking you to, you know, give me any.
yeah, we really just look at gross revenues when it comes to utility tax, so we don't get those details.
That's why it's at bottom, I think, because businesses are never gonna get rid of their landlines. And the only thing that's gonna change is as seniors pass the next only seniors at this point have home phones for the most part. Most residential phones are with seniors. So that'll still decline over time, but slowly, I would think. Everyone else has already gotten rid of them.
And then when it comes to electric, well, keep going. I know we're short on time, so we're gonna get this.
Let's take a look at fees and services. Really want to zero in on license activity, and permits, as well as plan check fees, both showing decreases. These are really indicators of what future development might be. I will say that, you know, we know there's additional multifamily projects that are being talked about, so this could very well change before we get to year end, but currently we're behind last year in terms of what we're seeing as potential development.
We pretty much have to get used to that trend because we're running out of land. I mean, there's no place, I mean, there's very few lots left to build on, so.
You warned us about this. You've been telling us about this for years, that these numbers are gonna continue to slide unless we, you didn't say this, but I said unless we continue to annex
Right.
and bring portions into the city, because our UGA is huge.
We have the same issue on sales tax, right? I mean, our sales tax growth has been great. A lot of that's been because of new construction. That's why the fact that we were only up 1.9 on the general merchandise, that's not a good, marker for the future at all.
That's correct. I also want to highlight, parks, culture and recreation. Again, we're seeing a much better year in terms of activity and people getting out more after the pandemic. Intergovernmental revenues. Actually want to highlight this grant number here. We're showing a $1.6 million increase. That's actually going to be accrued back to next year. So about 1.9 million of the 2022 number has to do with the reimbursements for the Veteran Services Hub improvements, which was actually an activity last year. So we'll move that back. Looking at just miscellaneous revenues, in terms of interest earnings, we're obviously the Fed rate has impacted that greatly. Really quick on utilities, no surprises in utilities. Revenues do look significantly higher, and they are, but we're not really comparing apples to apples. So what's built into the three utilities is essentially 2 rate increases because we didn't execute the 2021 rate increase until July 1st. So really, like I said, there's 2 rate increases in there. So we're seeing what looks like more significant revenues, but truly it's pretty normal.
We've had a hotter summer. I would think water revenue would have been up.
We had a slower start as well.
That's true.
So
I paid
we're,
more.
Hmm?
I paid more.
You paid more.
Oh, for sure.
we're pretty close. It's kind of evened out.
Yeah,
I was a little worried in June, July that we weren't going to meet projections, but
yeah, because we're close to a record for number of 90-degree days. I mean, Seattle, their record's 12 and they're at 11 right now.
I think
And they're expecting one this week. I think Thursday it's expected to hit 90 again. So they're gonna at least tie their record. We only average 3 days a year normally. So 12 is a big difference.
all right, let's kind of talk about what we see in the future. Property tax has really been driven by new construction. So that's new assessments, new properties that weren't taxed previously. So looking forward, been a little conservative for 2023. So I'm assuming $150 million being added. Last year we added about 220 million. So again, taking a conservative approach. So if it is $150 million in additional assessed valuation, that'll be $132,000 increase to property tax. Looking at sales tax, we've kind of talked about a lot of this already, but I do want to point out these 4 categories. I think these were, impacted by pent up demand. I think the stimulus money definitely impacted these 4 categories. The fact that they just opened up in June, I think, is when we lifted all the restrictions in terms of shopping. So, I think 2021 is, I think we're definitely inflated. So you can see double-digit decreases. This is for April sales. Saw similar decreases in May as well. So I think we're really coming back and that's leveling out, looking to the future. We talked about general merchandise. It's increasing at 1.8%. Inflation is, I think last month for Seattle was 9.5. Actually, it was 10. It was 10.1.
Was it really?
So, like we said, we think that volume has probably gone down, but people are paying higher for prices. The construction number is, 30% higher. But that's, we've talked about the cyclical nature of that. Food services and drinking places, these are restaurants. This is kind of the one bright spot still continuing strong in terms of recovery from the pandemic. I do want to talk a little bit about expenditures. So this graph shows a 10-year history of general fund salaries and benefits. You can see in the red and blue, that's salaries and benefits in terms of dollars. And the yellow line is percentage increase over the previous year. So we average about a 4% increase per year. Last year's increase was 4.5%. So that's, when we look to next year, each 1% is about $273,000 or so compared to the 2021 actuals. So we'll see a significant increase likely.
And those are all still, are we in contract negotiations with all of our
For the
bargaining units this year?
majority of employees have not received a cost of living adjustment for 2022 yet, probably 85% or so employees. We do have a little bit of data on what to expect in 2023 for benefit increases. The public employees retirement system contribution rates is going to have a slight increase, 0.14%. For medical insurance for regents, it's going to be between 3% and 6% increase. Kaiser Permanente is between 4% and 7%. For dental, Delta Dental 0% to 2%. Willamette Dental between 0% and 4%, and no increase at this point for vision coverage. I just wanted to highlight, it kind of struck me looking at it graphically, the Fed Reserve actions. This really goes back about 10 years. In a short period, in fact, about 4-month period, we've had more increases than we saw in a 5-year period. So a very drastic increase. I think I haven't looked at any economic reports here in the last 2 days, but judging by the stock market, they think it's going to be another 0.75% increase in September.
That's what yesterday told you?
That's what yesterday told me. It's the Federal Reserve's having a retreat in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, that gives indication for the second half of the year. And somebody must have heard something. This is my guess. This really, the statement is the Federal Reserve is trying to slow down the economy on purpose.
Yeah, we know that.
We need to be mindful of that.
They're not accomplishing it really well, but.
Which is why we'll probably see another 0.75% increase. Consumer price index, this is the national number. You get to see we're at historic highs. I'll remind the community that the target is 2%. This was July was 8.5%. So we did see a decrease from June. It's 1 month. Hopefully it's a trend, but we'll see. And the 2% target is based on core inflation, not this number. So core inflation takes out food and energy.
Which I'll never understand as long as I live, how food and energy are not part of the core inflation when those are the two things that everyone has to buy.
Right. So what is still in there?
Explain that to me, can you?
I can't. What I can say is energy is going down and food's still going up, so it's a wash. But that's just a moment in time. So who knows?
I just never understood how that's not part of core inflation.
But rent is still in there, and I don't think. We know that the housing market is cooling off, but I don't think that's going to impact prices anytime soon. So that's core number is probably going to be elevated for a while. This is the same information with Seattle, the Seattle number, and it's relatively the same trend.
Just bigger.
The June was 10.1. We won't see another inflation number until August, so we won't know until September what's happening in the local area. US gross domestic product. We at this point are showing 2 consecutive quarters of decline there in Q1, Q2, 2022. That is in general the identifier of a recession.
But they're not calling it. They
Not calling
refuse to call it a recession, no.
You typically see retail sales go down, you see job growth go the wrong direction, and neither of those are happening. So that's the reason we're not calling it a recession yet. But this number, like I said, this is the most common indicator of a recession. Other economic indicators, US jobs, surprisingly in July, the United States added 528,000 jobs. That was double the expectation. Unemployment ended up being 3.5%, the lowest in 50 years. We have now recovered every single job lost during the pandemic. It's one of the primary reasons we don't think we're in a recession. So still strong job growth.
And yet everyone is still short on labor. There's no unemployment and people have no labor.
John has
The
a great illustration for that.
US Treasury Inversion. This is another indicator of recessions, the 2-year versus the 10-year. So when the 2-year is paying more than a 10-year, that's an indication. We've been in an inversion for a while. The August inversion is growing and it's at the highest discrepancy since 2000. So the comment there is, an inversion has preceded every recession in the last 60 years, but every inversion has not seen a recession follow. So that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go into recession. To just give you an indicator of supply chain challenges, we've talked about this a little bit, and I think the committee knows that many of our capital projects are being delayed. I think the only material that we're not experiencing delay is concrete and asphalt, but everything else, everything from ductile iron, so manholes, valves, they're delayed between 6 and 8 weeks. So a lot of these projects are going to be pushed to the next year. So that's just more work for us to do next year, and because we do have a full slate scheduled for 2023, so it's going to be a little tougher for us next year. In terms of vehicles, we've kind of talked about this during the amendment, but we put in orders for 16 vehicles this year. We've yet to receive one. And we think we're going to receive police vehicles before the end of the year, but that's really our expectation. We don't expect to receive anything else this year. To close things off, we talked about this during the when we shared the budget calendar and the budget memo with the committee last month. But really we see 2023 as a reset year. We're not expecting a lot of expansion. We hope it will be a catch-up year. And like I said, we're going to have 2022 projects go into 2023. So we're going to have our work cut out for us next year. So that has been the message in terms of what to expect for 2023. We're watching things very carefully. You can see from the indicators, it's going to be very difficult. I was trying to figure out what a message I could send to this committee and I couldn't come up with anything, but Scott said, we don't know what we don't know. I mean, that's really what we're looking at in 2023. It's going to continue to change through this year, and I'm sure we'll change going into 2023 as well. So we'll stick with our conservative approach to the budget. Served us well over the years, so we'll continue to do that as well.
So we're not expecting a whole lot of investment dollars to turn over this season.
Well, we have reserves for that type of thing, and we'll be looking at that. But yeah, I mean, we're gonna be mindful in what we do, and we do have capacity issues as well, staff. So
I, for one, appreciate your conservative approach to the budget. It has served this city very well.
As do I.
We got through, the Great Recession in a lot better shape than most jurisdictions, probably most jurisdictions in the country, because of that past conservative approach to budgeting and having good reserves and not hiring people just for the sake of hiring, but only hiring where we need to fill holes. And obviously we have some people we need to hire right now, but good luck on that.
Okay, well, thank you.
3% unemployment
3.5.
and a labor shortage.
Okay, so we can start. Yeah, we are. So with that, we've reached the end of our agenda, and without objection,